every laugh, every smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste, the therapist. Let's go.
Hi. All right. Hi, beautiful people. If you are watching me on the replay, thank you so much for watching me. I appreciate you. My name is Celeste. I am a therapist from Boston. And my goal in coming on here is to just help people kind of shift the way they think. And I've been able to do that by talking to people that are doing things to empower the lives of others. And since the quarantine started, I decided to bring my podcast on video. So essentially what I'm already doing, what I have already been doing since 2018, I'm just kind of bringing it onto a video platform. And my amazing guests have agreed to allow me to do this in front of you guys. So I'm grateful always for that. So before I bring on my special guest, I wanted to put up this crisis text line that I do before the beginning of every show. And again, there's more than one way to reach out for support. This is just an immediate way that I found to be helpful. So this is a crisis text line, 741-741. You can use this line if you feel like you're struggling. You can connect to a crisis counselor. One of the reasons why I started this podcast is because I realized mental health or therapy is not always accessible, or people only know therapy as a modality for healing. So I really wanted people to kind of get other perspectives around different areas that they may find themselves struggling in. So today I'm going to bring on my special guest. His name is Dan K. I'm going to let him pronounce his last name because I don't want to butcher it. Dan, hi. Can you introduce yourself to my audience?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on, Celeste. My name is Dan Kihanya, and I'm the founder and host of Founders Unfound.
Yes, he is. Founders Unfound has a blog, a podcast. We're going to get into that and exactly how that came about. But before we do that, I really want my audience to kind of know who Dan is and what your passion is.
Sure. So I've been all about startups for the last 20 years plus, mostly in Silicon Valley, but I'm also up here in Seattle. I did a stint in Boston, which is where I'm from. And essentially, I love to be in and around startups. I love to be around founders. I love that creation process. And I realized this when I got out of undergrad. I went to work in the auto business, kind of big corporation. And it was challenging and engaging, but I knew that there was more to pursuing something that wasn't just about the bureaucracy of a big company. And so when I was thinking about going to business school, I decided to head out west to the West Coast and to Silicon Valley. And I went to school at Berkeley, and, with a hypothesis that, maybe if I do a startup that I can work for myself and I don't have to deal with any of that. But what I realized is that I really do love that process of creation. And if it was 500 years ago, and, probably if I was of direct European descent, then I would have been one of those people like Magellan or Balboa or Columbus, just like, let's go. There's something on the other side of that water. Let's go find it. We don't have a map. And so I really thrive in those kinds of situations. I'm not as good at repeating something over and over again, really consistently. I'm a messy thinker, but I think it benefits me when I do my creative stuff.
I think you have to be a messy thinker. When I think about startups and people that are trying to start things out, all I see is problems and issues that come about. It sounds like you love solving issues. You love the problem of solving a problem.
I do. And I became an engineer. I studied engineering when I was in undergrad. And it was because of that aspect. I like to solve problems. And even when I was in the corporate world, I kind of developed a passion around problem solving. And I don't think I was a great engineer. I could do the math, and I could figure out what I had to do. But the really great engineers kind of looked at the world like Neo from the Matrix. They just
Uh-huh.
saw it a different way that I didn't see it. I was always interested in the business side. So, but the problem solving aspects has definitely stuck with me.
So it's like you're in different pockets. You're like a kind of your hands are in different pockets, and literally you are doing different things now in your life, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of a student of many and master of none kind of person. Yeah, so right now I'm actually working on my fourth startup. And
Wow.
yeah, well, I should say I've done a couple more, but those are the four that have had some traction and success. So,
Uh-huh.
but I'm working on my fourth one. It's actually based in India. We're working on kind of building a new banking experience for young people in India. And I am based here in Seattle, so I spent a lot of time working with entrepreneurs, either directly one-on-one as in advisory roles or mentorship. And then I participate in a lot of programs like TechStars and some of the other accelerator incubator programs that are here in Seattle and in the Bay Area. And then the other thing is obviously my podcast, which is Founders Unfound.
Yes, Founders Unfound. So I want to kind of get into that. Founders Unfound. If you're listening to the podcast, there will be a link in the show notes that will lead you directly to his podcast. But on the front page of it, it says exceptional founders of African descent. Founders Unfound. Can you help my audience understand like what that's about and why you started this?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. When I was starting my current company and kind of engaging in the startup wheel again, I started to think about like maybe this will be my last one. I'm getting kind of older. What else can I do to sort of help pay it forward, have a legacy? And I've explored the idea of maybe doing some funding or building a venture fund or joining a venture fund. But inertia took over on those things. But one of the things I did was look around and say, why aren't there more people that look like me? I know that the capabilities, the talents, and the backgrounds essentially prepare people for taking on the sometimes grueling aspect of being an entrepreneur. So what is it? And doing some research, and the National Venture Capital Association says that less than 1% of venture capital goes to founders from underrepresented backgrounds. And so I said, why is that? And I said, let me look into that. And the refrain that I got from friends and colleagues in my network is there isn't a pipeline. They aren't out there. And I did a quick Google search, and it's pretty clear to me that we are out there. And so I said, what can I do to help? What can I help to do to change the situation and change that refrain, at least, that there isn't a pipeline of underrepresented founders who are doing amazing, impactful things? And so that was where the idea for Founders Unfound came from. And originally I was just going to do a blog and, send email back and forth with people and make little profiles, but got convinced that in today's media age, you got to be much more engaging. And so decided to do a podcast.
Nice.
And by the way, I am so amazed and appreciative that you are brave enough to do a live video show, because I haven't crossed that threshold yet. I still do a recorded podcast and edit the heck out of it. And but and the idea was, let's find entrepreneurs that that kind of fit investment consideration.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get asked about this all the time. I mean, there's so many entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds that are doing amazing things, building restaurant chains and ad agencies and law firms, but those things don't tend to focus on getting an investment, at least from the venture capital world. So we focused a lot on tech, e-commerce, and companies like that. And I wanted to not boil the ocean, as they say. So I started specifically with Black founders of African descent, and we're going to hopefully expand to other groups as well
Nice.
this year. But that's kind of was the purpose. And so I serve the entrepreneur. That I have an audience, and I have a couple of people who help me as volunteers. But at the end of the day, the entrepreneur is who I'm serving.
No, that's really good. And I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs and people, but because of the lack of knowledge or support, they struggle with allowing that piece of them to come out. Now, I want to go back to the stat you said. It's actually a stat that stood out for me, and you mentioned it
Mhm.
too, so we're on the same page. This part about the national venture, for people that are listening, I'm pulling up a stat. The National Venture Capital Association published that a mere 1% of venture deals go to funding teams with one or more African American entrepreneurs. Some common refrains, which Dan mentioned earlier, there are not enough out there. We are looking, but we aren't finding. Where's the pipeline? And we fund the best teams, regardless of what they look like. For my people that are listening to this and not really clear on like what does that mean to get funding, because some people may
Sure.
think you just kind of start and you figure it out. But what you're saying is that there are people that fund different programs.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So, anybody can start a business in America from a permission standpoint.
Mhm.
So it's there's no prerequisites or anything like that. You file a fee and you can set up a corporation, or you can do things as an independent person. Like for instance, people in your industry who are
Mhm.
therapists and so forth, right? It's a sole proprietorship and
Yeah.
things like that. And so those businesses tend to grow the old-fashioned way, which is you make money, you have revenue. Hopefully, your costs are less than your revenue, and you continue to grow and expand in a kind of normal, rational way.
So I'm old fashioned.
No. Old-fashioned way. No, 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 no,
Okay.
no, no, no. You're not. No, you're. I'm a dinosaur compared to you, so I would have no place to say anything like that. Just meaning traditionally, I mean,
Yeah.
this is the way capitalism has worked for hundreds of
Yeah.
years. And about 50, 60 years ago, this idea of can we take money and make fuel that accelerates those companies to grow faster. And a couple of the levers that they figured out was technology and infrastructure and software and innovation, kind of hard STEM type stuff. That's the stuff that the fuel worked the best for. And
Mhm.
so if you wanted to build the next Microsoft or the next Facebook or the next Google or whatever it was, you could show that consumers want it, or
Yeah.
customers that want it, and then take a bunch of money and go get a bunch more of those customers. And so that's where
Mm.
venture capital got born. And so if you're in certain industries, then they come to try and find deals with those kinds of companies to provide them funding. And there's usually they buy stock in your company, and essentially sometimes they sit on your board. Hopefully they're helpful for you in terms of being value add and helping you grow.
Mm. Well, for people that are listening to this and it may sound new to them, what would the steps be for somebody to look into what that would be like for them? Like, what would you say a starting point? Because I think with that 1% number, a big part of it is the lack of education around
Mm. Yeah.
venture capitalism and like what that looks like for people that are trying to start up. So what would you say to the people listening to that now?
Yeah. So, what I would say is first, think about what you want in life. I'm a big fan of self-realization. And there's, I had this conversation on another podcast about how privilege impacts your ability to move forward and momentum. And essentially this idea of privilege creates confidence. Confidence creates authenticity. Authenticity becomes attractive and allows you to sell. And so a lot of times people from underrepresented backgrounds feel kind of the opposite. Do I
Mhm.
really belong here, or are they just letting me in because I'm this tokenism, or what's in their minds? And
Mhm.
so I've tried to live my life in a way where I try to actualize and see what is it that I want to do. And so first of all, that's the first step. And not entrepreneurship is not for everybody. And the glamour and the sexiness that Hollywood tries to show, and even folks like Jay-Z, he's a 25-year overnight success, right?
Mhm.
And he grinded.
Mhm.
So it's not something that you want to do as a chore, as something as a necessarily a career. I think what ends up being the most impactful for folks is you see something, you see that you have an idea of how to fix it, and it just becomes overwhelming to you, like, I've got to go fix this. And that's really how entrepreneurs begin. I think there's some inherent, innate aspects of you that really fuel that. I know people, for instance, that thrive in the corporate space because they like to have the rules set, and then they master those rules. And for startups, you don't have any rules. And so the first step is not to just get caught up. Oh, this is a way for me to make money. This is a way for me not to have a boss. This is a way for me to, do whatever I want. Don't get caught up in those things. Get caught up in, is this something that I was meant to do? Is this my purpose? Right.
Yeah.
And then once you figure that out, then it's like, okay, what do I do now? So luckily there's all kinds of great programs out there. I mean, there's programs like the Founder Gym, which is an awesome program for underrepresented founders, particularly women, who can get sort of that basic understanding of what we're talking about. Like, how does raising money work? How do you set up a corporation? How do you go to the marketplace? Where do you look for customers? How do you build your accounting practices and capabilities, right? So Founder Gym's out there. There's some other great programs now, and there's this wonderful thing called Google. And so what I do, I mean, I think of myself as like a little sleuth. I love to look things up, and so
I believe you.
Yeah, so I'll put in something like, how do I raise money, right? And then there'll be something that comes up, and and then there'll be a few little terms in there like, pro ratchet, which is a fancy term I won't bother to go into, but I'm like, okay, what does that mean?
Pro ratchet?
Yeah, it's just
Sorry.
It's a deal term, right? But I'll look it up and I'll say, okay, I'll take that term and I'll put that into Google, and then I'll say, okay, now I know what that is. Now I can go back to that other thing. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunities to be hungry for knowledge and be curious. And then, I think the other thing is I talk a lot about is seek a network beyond your comfort zone. And that is not trivial, I know. And I think that the more that we get outside of our comfort zone in terms of the people that we can interact with, that we didn't grow up with, that aren't in our family, that we didn't go to school with, the more you can get those people into your network, or at least into your acquaintance circle, the easier it is for you to get information, to get resources, and to get access. Venture capital is notoriously, my friend Jillian calls it, has a broken doorbell problem. They only listen to people who come through their own network. And that's a bit of an over-exaggeration, but it's not too far. They want people to come in through recommendations of either entrepreneurs they've already funded or friends they know. And so it's pretty hard if you didn't go to school with these people, if you never worked with these people in a company, if you didn't grow up with them, just to show up and say, I'm part of your network. And so those two things, I think, I guess it was three, was understanding if you think you really want to be an entrepreneur. And again, there's some great resources about how you do kind of a self-assessment around that. Yeah. Understanding that, building the network, and really setting yourself up for having that confidence. Because what'll happen is you'll get feedback from people like, oh, you just talked about that idea, and maybe it's an idea that you thought about for 10 seconds, right? And it's like, that's an awesome idea. Let's talk about that, right? And so you'll get feedback like, oh, this is resonating, right? So I think those are some of the big things that I would recommend. I would also say this self-actualization stuff is real, and I like to say ask for what you want, because the answer to the unasked question is almost always no. When it's asked, you'll get a yes sometimes, right? So know what you want and be confident that you deserve what you deserve, and show that confidence. And so all these things are not buttons that you push and overnight they change. But they're things that you could be working on if you're in college, if you're just out of college, maybe you're in your first job, maybe you're looking for your first job. All this cost is your time and curiosity, all these things.
No, and to Dan's point, literally, I didn't come from an entrepreneur background. I worked in nonprofit, and I seen the need for mental health. I seen that everything that he said, the steps are the steps I took. I didn't take it in the mindset of, oh, this is what I need to do to like work on being an entrepreneur, and even building the network, especially when it came to my podcast and all of the things that I've never done before. I actually Googled and I looked outside of my network because I realized the ceiling was limited in my network, because people would say like, oh, that's really cool what you're doing, because I'm doing more than they're doing. But then I had to go a step more so that I can get the good feedback. And sometimes I think, the good feedback is good, but also I think it's important to have an open mind about things that we can improve on in this venture of entrepreneurship, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the fact that you stepped out there and that you're doing this, because I think it shows courage. And, courage is nothing. I mean, what do they say in World War II, right? Courage is you're afraid, but you go anyway,
Yeah.
right? It's not like you have some magic
Nope.
potion or
But
anything
then
like the video games.
that's what people say. They say like, how could you keep doing what you do? And I said, I promise you, like, I have fear. Anytime I'm starting something new, there's fear associated with it.
Yeah.
But I keep going anyways, because if I stay stuck in the fear, I feel like it would cause me more anxiety, because that passion is that thing that keeps me up. Like, I want to support people. The thing you talked about, number one, is literally every time I start, whether I'm doing a book or doing the podcast or whatever I decided to do, with it, even this video thing that I'm doing now, after COVID hit, it kept me, I was like, man, I want to do more. Like, how do I reach people and still support? And so what you're saying, those steps that you gave are so on point. And when you said it, I'm like, man, that's exactly what I did.
Yeah. And one of the things that I talk about, the thing that I wanted to showcase in the podcast is that entrepreneurs have a tough time. And so they're already in this place of, you got to be able to deal with rejection. And, in the morning you get some great news, and in the afternoon you get horrible news. And that every day is like that. And you have to make decisions every day. There's a lot of cognitive overload, they say, right? Like, today I have to decide, are we going to hire this person? Is the logo red or blue? And I have to review a contract to see if the agreement is what we want to do. Right. And then I also have to stuff some envelopes to, for the team, or, go out and buy some balloons for a party for the team. Right. So you're just constantly under this really impossible pace. I like to say a startup it's a marathon at a sprint pace. However, all of that said, founders, particularly Black founders, come from a background where we've already built that perseverance muscle. Just because life, as soon as you walk out the door, it's telling you this, it's telling you that, it's pushing you back, it's holding you down. And so we've already had to build that resilience and that perseverance and that grit. I've had people on my podcast who were homeless, people who were in prison, people who were, kind of focused and became elite athletes only to have injury or whatever, sort of make that dream basically come to finality. And they had to sort of figure out what was next. When they were banking on that was kind of my ticket. Right. And so all of these things prepare you to be, in my mind, an exceptional entrepreneur, because there's very few startups. I don't care what kind of company you're starting. There's very few companies that you start and it's like, 6 months, you're making $1 billion and every customer in the world is flocking to your door. Right. It's a hard road, but the ability to have that perseverance also gives you the confidence, because you're like, I've been through this before. And I tried to apply for a job. I mean, I don't want to kind of spoil it, but one of my next podcast, which is the episode, which is coming out on Thursday, the gentleman talked about being rejected from job after job after job after job. And he talks about this. And the guy's built 2 companies since then.
Dang.
Right. And, that was a person who could have been at the fork in the road and gone the other way and had despair and hopelessness and said, nah, forget it. It's just not worth it. But
Yeah.
you build that resilience muscle, it can propel you forward.
Yep. My start to even thinking about entrepreneurship was a demotion. And being
There you go.
demoted from my job, I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm disposable."
No, that's a hard, sobering, tough thing. I mean, that's like Oprah's story, right? As she said,
Yeah.
they basically wanted to fire me from being the anchor because the sort of the older white co-anchor guy didn't want to have anything to do with me, and it was the best thing in my life because I became, they gave me the talk show, and that sort of set me
Yeah.
on that trajectory. So at the time, she thought my career's over, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's these silver linings, and in particularly now in this era of COVID, the COVID pandemic. A lot of people are really struggling. I mean, it was a shock, right? And it came out of nowhere. And whether your health is vulnerable or your livelihood is vulnerable, your mental health is you've got to readjust for that. I know I have all those things. And so, I mean, I think hope is a superpower, and hope is built on confidence. It's built on belief. It's built on sometimes evidence,
Yeah.
right? Which could be, I did this before. And so it's the sort of counter to despair and to into fear. I mean, fear is going to be there no matter what. But and so I think if you want to be an entrepreneur, America is actually built pretty well for that. We as underrepresented or founders of color have a couple of steps behind the starting line that we have to travel. That's just a
Yeah.
fact. And hopefully my podcast and other people's programs are trying to bridge that, and so it shortens and we can be on the same starting line as everybody else. But that doesn't mean we can't run the race. It
Yes.
doesn't mean, right?
That's really amazing. That just warms my spirit. One thing about your podcast is that it gives people hope. I think about why I started my podcast around mental health is because I wanted people to have hope. And I think about basically it's parallel with you and what you're doing. You kind of want to give people hope by sharing other people's story. So that 1% margin that we see starts to climb a little bit more. For people that are listening to this and are feeling inspired, do you have any encouraging words for people that are maybe on the path of have an idea or want to start a process of being an entrepreneur? Any kind of like positive, especially with COVID happening and everyone being kind of at home. Some people are coming up with these ideas. Anything to say?
Yeah, I would say, like I said, make sure that you think about what you want to do, right? Because you can be an inventor or an innovator and then have somebody else, figure out how to patent that or partner with somebody who's actually going to go build it and sell it. If that's kind of where you are. But if you think, again, I have to do this, I think nobody else is working on this. This is a problem that needs to be solved, and I think I figured it out. So if you're crossing that hurdle, then I would say that starting a company is, well, I should say pursuing an idea is as easy as it's probably ever been in the technology space. I can't speak about opening a restaurant or building a services business. I haven't really done those things, but in the technology space, or if you have a product, there's so many programs and platforms out there where you can just build something to test out with consumers and or with if you have business customers to test out with them. And so I would say look at everything you do as an experiment and just say, if the experiment crosses this threshold, then I'll go to the next milestone or the next experiment. If it doesn't, then maybe I'll step back and say, is it, if I can improve this 20%, I'm still going to be nowhere near where I need to be. So maybe this isn't the right thing. So I would do that. I would take advantage of meetups and universities, when they were open, had, they do, somebody will come and speak, right? And it'll be somebody who's done something entrepreneurial, and they'll speak to a class, or they'll speak on campus, and sometimes those are open to the public. Go to those. Start to get yourself, sort of into the flow of either the industry or the tech community in general. If you're in a decent sized city in the United States, then there's a tech community out there. Atlanta is just on fire. There's so many people, particularly Black founders or Black technology people, who are moving from the Bay Area, and like, Atlanta's going to be the place. And so Detroit, Chicago, Dallas, Houston, certainly LA and San Francisco and Boston and New York and Seattle have been kind of the traditional hubs. And go and
yes,
and be the only Black person sitting there if you have to. Right?
It's
just
okay.
put on that, like, those blinders and say, I don't care.
Yeah.
Right. And just be there to soak it all up. And the more you learn, the more feedback you get. I don't know if you listened to the last episode that we did with Sheree. She talked about, she had a drawing of what she wanted to do, like a Photoshop. And she was walking around this party, and people were asking her about what she's interested in. And she had that. So she had no product, no software, no website, nothing. And this person wrote her a check.
That's crazy.
Right. And she had never met this person, but her passion for what she was doing, and the ability to articulate it and just show, hey, this is what our vision is, was enough for that person to say, wow, I'm on the Sheree train. Where do I send the money? Right. And that doesn't happen all the time, but it certainly won't happen if you are asking your boss at your company how to start a company, because they're not going to tell you anything. Right? They're going to tell you how you get a better mark on your performance review, or they help them get a better mark on their performance review. And so I like to think of the idea of reverse engineering your path. And so the only other thing I would say is, people have to pay the bills, and I understand that. And one of the big things about being in a startup is, particularly if you do something in technology, is the people who fund those companies expect you to fund a lot of it initially to prove that it works. And, most of us from underrepresented backgrounds don't have rich uncles or people who can just, I can go live at home for 2 years. And in fact, it's the opposite. Sometimes you're the first one to go to college or to get a good job, and you got to have that salary to help your family. And so I would say, if you need to do that, spend a few years in a company, learn as much as you can, and then think about, what does it take to be an entrepreneur? You have to be able to do lots of things. You need to know enough about all the areas of business: accounting, HR, certainly customer service, technology, right? You don't have to know any of it as an expert, except for maybe technology if you're the main tech person. So go find roles like that. Let's say you're a developer, and you're working at a big company. Do a cool project, do the next big thing at the company. But when they come calling, say, hey, we have another big project that's going to be the hot, sexy thing for our company. Or you can go work with the accounting folks and figure out how to make their software work better. Go work with the accounting folks. It won't be that sexy, and it won't be maybe even that interesting, but you learn a lot. You'll just by being around them, just by absorbing, right? Can you go work with the marketing people? Can you go on sales calls? Can you go, they need volunteers to go to an event where you put on the company t-shirt and talk about what we do. Do those things. Yeah. All of that stuff is building blocks for how you can be an entrepreneur. And so it's there. Just got to be proactive.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good. So you got to get your hands dirty, guys. If you're listening to this, it's not, Dan started off at the beginning saying entrepreneurship is not sexy. It's a lot of work. So basically everything that he's saying is just kind of like, go out there, put your foot out there, start acting on it. I'm a big believer in not like staying stuck in my head, and more so acting on what I want to do. And didn't start off as Celeste the therapist. I started off as something else, right? So everything that you're saying, I 100% agree with you. So if you are listening to this, make sure you check out Founders Unfound, a podcast, blog, and it's amazing. There's something about, and if you listen to my podcast, it's pretty much similar concept, but we're talking a lot about entrepreneurs and how they got started. One question: any tips on how to maybe to start a personal training business?
Oh, sure. So that's to me about reputation and network is any kind of business where you're doing one-on-one or service-oriented things. I think it's about building reputation. So how do you do that? So for obviously, first of all, is there a way that you can leverage your own personal network? So can you kind of work out the kinks with friends and family? Say, hey, I'll work with you for free, an hour a week, and you give me feedback. Am I too much of a drill sergeant? Am I too soft? Am I pushing you too hard? Am I not telling you enough about food and sleep, or whatever it is that they think would be beneficial? So kind of hone your approach, right? And then I would leverage access to the additional networks that are sort of the next layer out. So I'm not sure if you have a day job, so to speak. And so are there people that you work with that you could, again, offer the ability to help train them at a discount rate or for free for a while? Are there people at your church, your community? If you're in school, can you find avenues that way? And it's, to me, I think I'm not great at it. I'm more, like I said, I'm more of a tinkerer, just put my head down and focus on the gadgets. But the people I see that are really good at it, it almost becomes organic. I mean, they just keep getting referrals after referrals after referrals. And so it's really all about your reputation at the end of the day. I mean, there's, once you have that, then it's binary. You should get paid what you're worth. And so that's the other element is once you sort of show that, you get 5 stars, and I don't know, there are some platforms out there. A friend of mine started one called Guided Fitness. And then there's a few others out there where personal trainers can actually go on and, it's kind of like a matching system where consumers go on and can, sort of match up with personal trainers. And it's good for the trainer because you don't have to do a lot of sales, right? You just show up. The other thing I would say is maybe find some allies, people that are already training that aren't necessarily competitive. Maybe they live in a different area. Maybe they do a different level, and just shadow them, just go and shadow them and say, hey, I'm going to hang out with you. I'll be quiet. I won't interrupt anything. I just want to watch what you do and how you interact and see if I can learn. So all of those things are possible. And so just chase the credibility. That's really what it's about, because it's the 80-20 rule, right? So 20% of the trainers get 80% of the work because they have the best reputations.
Dan, you're a beast. You're a natural at this. You just started, like, you wasn't prepared for that question. It was amazing watching you flow through that. I love it.
That's what I do. That's just why I help startups. I'm able to help a wide range of startups.
Yeah, that's dope. My last, go ahead. I
was gonna say, if she asked me to do a lot more, I'd be tapped out. So,
my last question is this screen thing you have on humanity.
Humanity over calamity.
Yeah. What is that?
So that's a phrase I came up with just in the COVID pandemic. We wanted to do something, and so I wanted to create some swag, some apparel, and a T-shirt. So we have T-shirts on our store. We have Founders Unfound stuff, but to me, it just kind of summarizes how I look at things, which is calamity is basically crisis, chaos, disaster, those kinds of things. And I believe together we can overcome. I mean, humanity is undefeated so far. I mean, maybe you look at if you're a Christian, you believe in the flood. We still had a few. We managed to make it squeak by that one, but for the most part, humanity is undefeated so far, right? And there's been wars, there's been famines, there's been lots of other pandemic, as well. So I'm just a believer that we can overcome if we're working together. We have lots of empathy and grace with each other, and we try to support each other. And so we came up with these T-shirts. So you can get them on our site. Just go to Founders Unfound and click on the store button. And $5 for every T-shirt, which is basically more than any profit I would ever make on it. So I'm not making any money. But $5 from every t-shirt goes to a COVID-19 relief fund. And we chose the Center for Disaster Philanthropy because they have a very wide-ranging set of initiatives that go from frontline workers to vulnerable communities. So they're doing a lot of different things. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, no, thank you for being here. Thank you for all of your knowledge, all of your free knowledge that you just gave to us. It was amazing. And I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate this. You do some really great stuff. And,
Thank you.
We didn't talk about any of this, but, sometimes the stigma around mental health, particularly in our community, we need to get past that. And so you're a brave voice for being out there and helping to get people educated and also to give people inspiration and hope. So thank you.
Thanks. All right. I'm going to say bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
So that was Dan. Let me just take this off really quick. That was really good. I'm grateful to him for coming on. You're welcome. I'm grateful to him for coming on. That was amazing. One of the things that I believe is that there's power in community. And, when I think about Founders Unfound and I think about what he's doing, it lets me know I'm not alone. When I'm on the struggle bus trying to get things started and moving, and I feel like it's just me. And then I hear somebody's story and I start to get hope, or I start to get ideas. And whether we're talking about entrepreneurship or whatever it is that you're struggling with, I think it's going to be important to reach out for support. We can't do life alone. I believe that. And I know with all of the social distancing, it's really more physical distance. There's things that are happening that we can tap into. Not as conventional as we would like it, but they're there. So that's kind of my hope and my goal for you guys. And that's why I decided to come on video 5 days a week so that I can share that with you guys. So I love you guys. We'll be back tomorrow to talk to somebody else who's empowering the lives of others. Again, if you want to be on the podcast or have a podcast idea, all you got to do is email me or follow me on social media and let me know in my DMs. And until next time, I'll talk to you guys later.
Every laugh, every smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste.